Now coming to the next slide, saving lives. The government is showing that India's call to COVID situation was a very well developed and well designed, because it also catered the epidemiological as well as economic research data, especially those pertaining to Spanish flu. So the vaccination, which makes the full power growth for the Indian economy by virtue of saving of life, protection of livelihood, and pushing the benefits to the deprived sections, as well as protection of their rights, as well as the jobs which were lost. So in the villages which we saw, the Manrega as well as DBT transfer were under a great health recovery for the economy. Then second is policy focused on minimizing loss in a worst case scenario when uncertainty is very high. So policy focused, which we see under COVID, was DBT, that is direct benefit transfer into the accounts of the needy people. Then the protection of people by 37 lakh cases, reduction in loss of 1 lakh lives. So 1 lakh lives were saved. And V-shaped recovery, which we see in this analysis of the economy survey, clearly from 7.5% and a strong recovery from 23.9 in Q1. Now this again makes very good news for the government of India. We see that the statistics are clearly showing that how we are rising in the food grains areas under cultivation, which were under declination in 2021-2022. So which again makes a rise, and again a V-shaped recovery, again shows a declination trend. But although the Rabi crop shows a declination, but the Kharif crop is again on a rise. So Kharif crops, which are grown from the month of July to June to September, are again on a rise, and production of wheat and rice were again seen as a constant rise. So these are the paddy crops and these are wheat, which shows the constantly rising trend which we see in the economy survey in the past year till December 31st. So again this makes a good news for the sustainable economic development in terms of India, which was in threat. Now the production linked incentives PLI, which again makes the news for 13 sectors vis-a-vis automobile, pharmaceuticals, specialty steel, telecom networking, electronic technology products, white goods, food products, textile products, technical textiles, high efficiency solar photovoltaic module, and advanced chemistry cell batteries, which are used in hybrid electric vehicles, manufacturing of medical devices and mobile manufacturing, specified electronic components, and critical key starting materials are under the rise, drug intermediaries, active pharmaceuticals, and ingredients are again on the rise. So retrospective tax was repealed by the government to produce and promote more and more investment, and in order to cater the tax threats and tax terrorism which we saw in the earlier news. So in order to curtail the tax terrorism, in the previous year's economy survey, the phenomena of retrospective tax was curtailed. यानी कि retrospective tax क्या होता है friends? The tax on the past expenditures as well as the lagging taxes which were previously not taken by the government machinery and found by the income tax department or CBIC are taken under the retrospective tax, which were highly threatening the corporate and industrial investment. Now the retrospective tax has been repealed, which is again a good news for investors and the corporate sector, and which again attracts more investment and raising GCFC, gross fixed capital formation, for the economy. Now coming to the next, so revised definitions of MSME. In order to boost the MSME sector, the definition has been revised, that is micro industries are less than 1 crores industry. Earlier it was 50 lakhs, now it is raised to 1 crore. So industries having around 1 crore potential will be considered to be micro industries. Small will be the companies which are having 10 crore of potential. The medium companies will be having 50 crore of potential, less than 50 crore potential. So this again simplifies the definition of MSME in order to make the financial inclusion as well as the MSME sector, which was helping the beneficiaries of this sector, was also helped under the MSME new definition. Now the next slide is liberalization for the BPO sector. Now BPO sector is one of the most important sector for the development of economy, as the BPO sector caters the development of the online services across the globe, connecting the whole world into a one single chain. For example, the sector which are under USA, which are under government of Britain, Japan, Israel or anywhere, the BPO sector cater the needs and demands of such sectors by taking them on call, business process outsourcing, online outsourcing and outsourcing from sitting in India and providing services to the industries sitting in USA. So clear definition of OSP, that is other services provider, which are making the news, and the limitation of such services catering the customers. BPO services are defined to mean the call and taking on the customers on call center services. Now removal of registration requirements for OSP in the centers in India. No bank guarantee requirements, that is bank guarantee is not needed in order to provide the facilities for the BPOs under this scheme. Now the next is telecom sector, which makes the news. So there is structural reform in the telecom sector in terms of AGR, that is adjusted gross revenue, which was again in news, an issue with USA. So the telecom sector in terms of high-tech 4G to 5th generation mobile communication, which is going to be launched in this year in India, has made the good news, because AGR was issues between various communication industries which were not able to cater the demands of the government as well as not able to pay the taxes. Now bank guarantee rationalized, reduction in bank guarantees requirements by the license fee and other similar lives for auctions held in no bank guarantee, which requires secure installment payment. So ऐसे सेक्टर्स जहाँ पे इंस्टॉलमेंट पेमेंट हो रहे थे, they are not required to pay the more and more installment which are secured. Now interest rate rationalized and penalties from delayed payment, license fee or a spectrum usage charge, यानी कि SUC, which was under debate for 5G auction, is again made rationalized under this process and it was removed. So SUC and license fee is removed. Remember friends, for your UPSC mains point of view, 100% FDI, यानी कि foreign direct investment has been made 100% route under the automatic route permitted in the telecom sector. यानी कि टेलीकॉम सेक्टर में एनी कंपनीज अंडर द FDI कैन पे एंड टेक द चार्ज ऑफ इंडियन मार्केट इन टर्म्स ऑफ देयर इन्वेस्टमेंट एंड कैटरिंग द यूज ऑफ 5G टेक्नोलॉजी। 5G टेक्नोलॉजी के लिए किसी भी ग्लोबल कंपनी को इन्वेस्टमेंट के लिए अट्रैक्ट कर रही है बिकॉज ऑफ 100% FDI and no spectrum use charges. Coming to the next, see the space sector, which again makes the headline. Space sector में India was again making a huge leap from the other economies of the world. Like in USA we see the SpaceX, how far it is making the leap from the other companies. Still the ISRO and Antariksh Corporation is taking a huge leap. So remote sensing sectors for increased private sector participation. More private sector investment is attracted by the government by making more liberalization under space sector, and the acquisition and use of geospatial data, which is again very important. Geospatial data which is used for weather forecasting, any activity of the army and any activity of the enemy nation that are under attack, and it were regulated and licensed to obtain for the use of such data. So इनका regulation और इनका licensing करना, they were regulated. Now the guidelines has been liberalized. Again the guidelines has been liberalized. Now self-certification regime for the various entities by making the self-approval license, by helping them to cater those process of data formation which are under their threat. So geospatial data and maps are to be self-certified by the entities, which was again making a good news. So कोई भी कंपनी कोई भी डेटा को यूज करना चाहती है, then it needs to self attest those data and the maps which they are taking into consideration, and there is no need for the government machinery to counter check their development. Now drone rules again, which makes the headline, is the drone technology, and in August 2021 this drone technology was liberalized by the government of India in order to make the industry's availability of drones up to 500 kg are now subjected to regulations. यानी कि earlier जो भी drones बन रहे थे, if they are under 500 kg then they need to get regulated. Earlier it was 300 kg. So 300 kg limit has been increased to 500 kg. Remember it, friends. And several approvals abolished within the total forms field reduced from 25 to 5. Now this process is again liberalization of drone rules in order to keep surge or rise the production of drones in the Indian industry as well as the market. And types of fees, there were various fees charged for the drones manufacturing, which were 72 in numbers and now reduced to 4. Only 4 kind of fees are now charged in order to manufacture the drones. Again very important. So 3 points keep in mind. The weight of drones under the taxation should be increased from 300 to 500 levels, and the number of types of fees reduced from 72 to 4, and the forms to be filled reduced from 25 to 5. Again very important. Now keep it in mind. We should look into the other banking reforms, which again makes the news for the year ending, was that 5 lakhs depositor per bank, increase in depositor insurance from 1 lakh to 5 lakhs. इंश्योरेंस को कहाँ से कहाँ तक बढ़ा दिया गया फ्रेंड्स? 1 लाख to 5 lakhs तक. Again, this lead to 98.1% of the total number of accounts being held and fully protected, and 50.9% of total deposits being insured in end of March 2021. So 98.1% of the accounts बढ़ा दिए गए under insurance, यानी कि there is certain death or casualty, then the insurance is provided by the banks, which is again under rise. So 50.9% of the total depositors were make the headlines till the end of March 2021, which is again we are looking into the end of this March 2022 again to rise from more than 55%. Now coming to the next slide, that is disinvestment or strategic disinvestment, which makes the news. Public sector commercial enterprises classified as strategic and non-strategic sectors were fully opened for privatization, यानी कि in terms of defense sector, railway, post offices and banking sector, as well as aviation, are slowly made under the process of strategic disinvestment so as to provide more and more involvement of investment from the foreign direct investments and foreign institutional investment to make the economy more growth. And the identified strategic sectors are atomic energy, space and defense sector first, and the second is transport and telecommunication, then power, petroleum, coal and minerals, which are very important for the government. So these are being under strategic disinvestment. Further, banking, insurance and financial services are also disinvested, and privatization of एयर इंडिया, जो कि हमने रिसेंटली देखा एयर इंडिया को फिर से टाटा कंपनी ने परचेस कर लिया है. Now what is the benefit of this kind of disinvestment? Now disinvestment make a process of selling of certain government shares into the market in terms of PSUs, core government sectors, and attracting more and more investment from the private bodies from the global market so as to cater the needs and demands of such sector. Now, relaxation of restricted areas, mapping prohibited to specific attributes of high sensitive locations, which we see in the economy survey. Relaxation of export restrictions, so the export which were earlier under threat of the various kind of limits were made relaxation under this new policies, and the export of maps with resolution up to 1:100. वैसे maps जिनका resolution 1:100 के ratio में है will be done, and earlier it were under 1:25, 2,50,000 resolution. So resolution की लिमिट बढ़ाकर 1:100 कर दी गई है. Now open access to publicly funded data which are under the government offices are to be purchased in terms of geospatial data produced using public funds, including data produced by the Survey of India, that is NSO के द्वारा जो भी डेटा निकाला जा रहा है, that are to be open for the sale and purchase by any private entity, and it is also available to all the Indian entities, which is very far looking move from the government, and it is important For example, it is considering all the Indian entities which can make the question for prelims point of view. Remember it? So prelims में UPSC ऐसे क्वेश्चन पूछ सकती है कि how far the data is to be increased in order to cater the need of the market, and what are the measures taken by the government of India in order to liberalize those data availability. Coming to the next slide, which we see in the economy survey, is new dimension for the important contact intensive services and contact intensive services or macro services, which are the macroeconomic indicator. And equipped under the challenges, the government of India opted to use safety nets for vulnerable section, which we saw in the barbell strategy, as well as this agile approach. So agile approach as well as barbell strategy shows the protection measures for vulnerable section, and it is a Bayesian updation of information based on statistical analysis of available data. Now we should look into the other aspects of the data available in terms of Bayesian analysis. So अभी हमने Bayesian analysis के बारे में थोड़ा सा समझा. अब हम देखते हैं states of India health index, how the health parameter of various states are rising after the vaccination, which was earlier 0.22 near 0.22 in the first condition, and it was shown a constant recovery. The health sector is constantly rising after vaccination. Again, the NSDP per capita again saw a recovery and rise from 25 to 175 के अराउंड NSDP रेज करते हुए हम देख रहे हैं. So index of health outcomes correlate positively. It is very positive, and inequality income also being reduced as shown in the Gini coefficient, and per capita income of Indians again rising. So in advanced economy, inequality correlates negatively with the index of health and social outcomes, while income per capita correlates positively. So there is positive rise in income and per capita, while the conflict between growth and inequality is clearly seen across advanced economies, and inequality and growth coverage affects the health among the Indian states. So after vaccination, in the second stage of COVID wave, we saw a constant rise of the health condition of Indians, and there was constantly abruption in the cases of NSDP per capita, which again makes the good news for the performance of Indian economy. Now in the next slide, we see the declination of the domestic general government health expenditure, how the health expenditure has been catered by Indian government. So Indian government has second highest health expenditure, that is around 2018 we saw it was near to 63, and in other countries such as China, our major competitor, it was 40, and declined to Thailand, which is near 10. So India has made a surplus move in the health situation. Now we see that how Indian policymakers as well as the actions are taken in order to cater the demand of the economy and balancing the situation in competition to the other Asian markets. Now demand trends, as we see that total consumption in 2019 first is 5.9 and government consumption is 7.9, private consumption 5.5, which is declining to minus 9.1 level. So it is declining to minus 9.1 level, and in second move it is rising to 6.9%, and again in recovery it makes 97.1%. Gross fixed capital formation, which is certain declination in 2021, minus 10.9 and rise to 15, so made a total 102.6. Exports, which were negative in both the 2019-20 and 2021, were again rise to 16.5%. Is again a recovery. Imports again 0.8% to 13.6% to 29.4%. Again there is huge recovery in the import sector and 111.8%. Now GDP is rising from 4.0, certain declination 7.3, again rise to 9.2, which is why we called it a V-shaped recovery. So in this way we see constantly that there is improvement in the data from consumption to gross fixed capital formation, which attracts the investments in the sectors to the imports, exports as well as GDP. Now looking into the next, Indian economy in a snapshot view. In a snapshot view, we saw that GDP growth is rising to 9.2 and forecasted for 8 to 8.5 in the year 2022. Again, fiscal deficit is 3.4 to 9.2 and 8.8, which is again a good news in percentage. So 5.2, which is again in a tolerance band. But the WPI, which makes the problem for the government, is 12.5 in the month of November and 14.2% in December, which is highest in 12 years. 12 सालों में सबसे बड़े स्तर पे होलसेल प्राइस इंडेक्स को देखा गया है, which makes a matter of concern due to rise in food, vegetables, oil prices, as well as the price of other food materials. Foreign exchange reserve is highest to 633, rather 634.5 billion US dollar. Agriculture and forestry and fishing was in rise in the COVID period, but it is declining, but it again shows a rise through 3.5 level. Now industrial growth, which was declined during the COVID lockdown period to minus 0.7 and recovered very sharply to 11.8%. Services growth rates of GVA rise from 7.2, decline to 8.4, minus 8.4 and rise to 8.2, which is again a V-shaped recovery in services. So we saw a constant rise in the various kind of system provided under the Indian economy, and each and every system and sectors are showing their improvement from pre-pandemic level to post-pandemic level as well as post-Omicron level, which is again good news for the Indian economy. Now the consumption which we saw here is 7.0% growth, which again makes good news. 7% growth in 2021-2022, with the government consumption remaining the biggest contributor than the previous years. So previous years we saw a decline in the consumption pattern, but yet after the lockdown over, जैसे ही सेकेंड लॉकडाउन फेज खत्म हुआ, वी सॉ 7% ऑफ कंजम्पशन बाय इंडियन इकोनॉमी एंड द गवर्नमेंट कंजम्पशन एस्टिमेटेड टू ग्रो बाय स्ट्रॉन्ग 7.6% level, assuming and surpassing the pre-pandemic level, which is again far better than 7% and making a good news for Indian economy. Now this makes the again good move from the Indian economy holders and policy makers that when the consumption is rising, then demand is rising, and the manufacturing as well as service sectors will yield their utmost level and productivity will rise, leading to the healthy economic situation. And coming to the next, investments has been attracted, although it was under little decline, which forms the GFCF, that is gross fixed capital formation. So investment makes the GFCF, gross fixed capital formation, in a year where little bit of stronger growth of 15% in 2021-2022 due to rise in FII and forex rise, which is far better than the pre-pandemic level. So investment was high, and which shows the quickening of virtuous cycle of growth. The cycle of growth, which was declining in the COVID scenario, again saw a steep rise and making a virtual cycle of growth and making a V-shaped recovery. Via capex and infrastructure spending has increased capital formation in the economy, lifting the investment to GDP ratio to about 29.6% in 2021, as highest in the 7 years. So ये डेटा आप याद रखेंगे फ्रेंड्स, 29.6% of recovery in highest 7 years. Now the next slide, which shows the safety nets used to cushion the vulnerable sections of the society as well as MSMEs, which were under the various threats by the investments and infrastructure, quarantine facilities, and understanding the virus symptoms and spread. Lockdown were made, and the impetus was put on the increase of vaccination to the suburbans, rural areas as well as vulnerables free of cost. That again makes the safety nets more stronger in terms of India. Hence, economic safety nets, world's largest free food program, direct benefit transfer, world's largest free vaccination program, and relief for the small and medium enterprises, which makes the safety net. RBI's monetary support. The RBI simultaneously provided the monetary support to the economy by pushing more and more fund impetus for the MSMEs and other small sectors. Plus Atmanirbhar Bharat Abhiyan. Now many of these safety net provisions continued during the second wave and has been extended further as the appropriation was made. So government has made the safety nets more availability to the small industries as well as vulnerable sections, and this was also ramp up, showing the holistic vaccination program by the government of India. So Pradhan Mantri Kisan Samman Nidhi was provided under this safety nets, and Atmanirbhar Bharat Abhiyan was put forward. Then food security under Pradhan Mantri Garib Kalyan Ann Yojana was provided. So PM Kisan, which transferred rupees 6,000 to every farmers having more than or less than 2 acres of land. Then there is Pradhan Mantri Garib Kalyan Yojana, PMGKY, which provide the free food grains, wheat and rice to the every persons. Then One Nation, One Ration Card, and Ujjwala for transfer of LPG to the vulnerable sections and in the villages. Now employment, in terms of employment, to recover the pandemic shock, there was impetus on Manrega, Mahatma Gandhi National Rural Employment Guarantee Scheme, which provide 100 days of job availability for livelihood in order to protect the vulnerable sections and village people of Indian rural areas. And the next was Pradhan Mantri Garib Kalyan Yojana, PMGKY, which also provided the employment to the various rural workers and the people who are unemployed and which migrated from cities to their villages. Then there was Atmanirbhar Bharat Rozgar Yojana, 3 schemes for employment. Remember, very important for UPSC prelims, mains and interview. Atmanirbhar Bharat Rozgar Yojana, which provide the employment, security and jobs to the people who are living in rural areas as well as who migrated during the lockdown, such as real estate employers, workers and people who were working. Now housing scheme, Pradhan Mantri Awas Yojana, both Gramin as well as urban. Skill development, for skill development and development of the technical training, Deen Dayal Upadhyay Gramin Kaushal Yojana, in which training were provided to the various small sectors and the people who were working for development of their technical capabilities. Then next was Pradhan Mantri Kaushal Vikas Yojana, PMKVY, in order to develop the skills and technical capabilities for the employment and training of various people in the country. Now the next is cash transfer. So Jan Dhan account Yojana makes the Jan Dhan Khata and direct benefit transfer to the beneficiary's account in the COVID period, which again makes the good news. In terms of emergency credit, restructuring of default loans and credit guarantee schemes for MSMEs. Credit suspension of corporate insolvency under Insolvency and Bankruptcy Code was also seen in the news, and credit guarantee scheme for MSME and microfinance institutions was again under a liquidity facility. Then partial credit guarantee schemes 2.0 for non-banking financial companies. So earlier we saw a decline in non-banking financial companies due to lack of funds and their investment capabilities, but partial credit guarantee scheme 2.0 provided huge impetus to their investment capabilities by investing more and more into the NBFCs and MFIs, that is microfinancial institutions, for fresh lending to MSME and individuals which are engaged in startups. So startups और entrepreneurship को promote करने के लिए गवर्नमेंट ने more fund allocate किया. Then special long term repo operations for small finance banks and additional capital to NABARD, National Agricultural Bank, for reconstruction and fund allocate किया गया. Then किसान credit card KCC, PM स्वनिधि योजना, जिसके द्वारा लोगों को उनके फंड्स उनके खाते में पहुंचाए गए. Then helping the self-help groups, Deen Dayal Antyodaya Yojana, to help the marginalized sections and vulnerable people of the societies. More and more fund allocation and direct benefit transfer. Then special liquidity facilities for non-banking financial companies, higher financial companies and medium financial institutions. Loan guarantee scheme for COVID affected sectors like health, infra and tourism and so on were provided by the government of India, which are shown in this economy survey. Now the monetary and financial support. Monetary policy calibrated to provide accretion and support to growth and careful control the order to avoid the medium term dislocation of excess liquidity. जब liquidity excess हो रही थी तो उसको बैलेंस करने के लिए मीडियम टर्म डिसलोकेशंस किया गया. देन मॉनेटरी पॉलिसी कमेटी cut the policy rate by 115 bps. Remember this data for your prelims point of view as well as mains. यानी कि 115 बेसिस पॉइंट पे उस डेटा को रिड्यूस किया गया. बट ड्यूरिंग द फरवरी टू मई 2020 ऑन टॉप ऑफ द रिडक्शन ऑफ 135 बेसिस पॉइंट्स. So this was highest reduction in the repo. Highest reduction, that is 135 basis points in the last 12 years of the fiscal year. Now coming to the next, marginal standing facility, that is MSF. MSF was again remained unchanged to 4.2. MSF unchanged to 4.25% and reverse repo rate was 3.35%. Now RBI to continue with its accommodative stance in which there is a protection for the marginalized and small sections of the society as well as protection for the MSME. So RBI put forth the accommodative stance to protect the sections and additional steps to ensure adequate liquidity in the market. The system allows the central and state government finance themselves to lower rates. That means lower rate financing by the government itself. Now government leveraged to array 80 higher financial institutions representing industry, services, goods. So higher financial institutions which were 80 in numbers, 80 HFIs in terms of services, global trends, macro stability indicators as well as other activities from both public as well as private sources, which we see by HFIs which were 80 in numbers, and the gauge of the underlying state of the economy on a real time basis. यानी कि रियल टाइम बेसिस पे इकोनॉमी में क्या बदलाव हो रहे हैं उन सबको डिटेक्ट करने के लिए 80 HFIs को इंक्लूड किया गया. Now the HFIs for gauging trends in economy as much as art as well as science. For example, e-way bills, GST collection, electronic toll collection, retail mobility, UPI, ATM transaction and so on. Now what it indicates that the government is trying its best to protect the industries. More than that, the industries are so much so sufficient that they are surviving in their own in terms of various processes of economy and transactions. Now macroeconomic stability, that means India's balance of payment remained in surplus despite the COVID lockdown challenges. Balance of payment which cater the current account as well as the capital formation in terms of FPI, FII and so on, it was under the rise despite the 2 years of lockdown, and this allowed the Reserve Bank of India to keep accumulating foreign exchange reserve. So foreign exchange reserve was seen to be highest rise of 634 billion US dollar by the Reserve Bank of India. So as the end of November 2021, India was fourth largest foreign exchange reserve compared to the world highest posing economy such as China, Japan and Switzerland, and fourth was India. Remember this chart for your prelims point of view. Now, in the next fiscal balance, we saw that the decline of the economy was provided with the health response caused by the fiscal deficit. Now, health response was declining in the first quarter, then again subtle rise in second, again rising in third and fourth due to constant vaccination and door-to-door vaccination campaigns, which saw fiscal deficit or government debt rising. However, there has been a strong rebound by the government revenues. Now, inflation, which we saw the inflation was again rising, but the CPI, which rise to 5.4%, making a tolerable band, but the WPI rose to 12.4 to 14.5% in December, which is again a matter of think by the government of India. Now, major issues during past 2 years and recovery phase, that is shortage of semiconductor devices and seaborne trade. Those trades which were coming from the foreign nations in terms of seaborne trade as well as the shortage of semiconductor devices was seen very, very important for your prelims as well as mains, and the spillover effect shown in the industries and especially in automobile sector